It is 9 p.m. and I am here with a special guest tonight, Mr. Michael Schratt. And we're going to be discussing the world of black projects, stealth aircraft, suppressed technologies, UFOs. What are commonly called UFOs, but we may have identified some of these very mysterious craft that have been spotted and seen flying around. May have some explanations for some of this stuff and some things that are going to make people go, So, Michael, man, where do we begin tonight? Let's kind of like talk a little bit about the road trip and some of that stuff. I think a lot of people are interested in our new project and what we're setting up here. So we'll begin with some of that stuff and kind of venture into where this kind of research. This is you're going to cover some of your research here tonight. That's some of your more recent stuff that you've been uncovering. But whereas with the UFO road trip, I think we're gonna be going back in time to some of the earlier stuff and trying to start from the beginning to really go through a lot of that stuff to get up to this point. But this is kind of like a point of where we're at, and then we're gonna press rewind with the show and kind of show how we got to this point. Right, and what point we may even be at and not really know. All these things are so compartmentalized. It's hard to know who knows about what and what kind of capabilities have actually been implemented into actual aircraft that we're designing and now using in the Air Force.
Right.
So, but a lot of these things, I talked to a lot of these people, including the curator at that museum, David Haw. What was his last name?
I don't recall.
Yeah, David. It's in the. I wrote it down. It's a weird pronunciation, but David from the museum, he had said that he tends to lean toward. A lot of people tend to lean toward the advanced aircraft or man-made aircraft rather than alien explanation for a lot of these sightings and stuff. And I tend to agree with that, knowing what I know about metamaterials and invisibility cloaking and the research that I've done into that. Alien, something that has interstellar super advanced like an alien would absolutely have capabilities where we wouldn't even see the thing unless it wanted us to. So I tend to lean toward that explanation a lot myself. It just boggles my mind about what they actually have for technology out there, and then what this technology actually is and how it works. And that's sort of what my whole goal in this thing is, and the focus is going to be working with the scientists and the laboratories out there to back engineer some of this stuff and figure out what's disinformation and what is what actually works and experiment and what can be reproduced.
Right.
Anyways, I'm gonna quit rambling on.
That's okay.
People are here. A lot of people came here to listen to you, so I'm gonna let you take.
No, not me. I'm nothing special. So.
Oh, don't talk yourself down, Michael. Go for it, man. Why don't you take the floor?
Sure. Okay. So we were kind of talking before we went live here about the Blackbird program. We discussed the 4 different aircraft that are within the Blackbird family. We've got the CIA A-12 single-seat spy plane. We've got the SR-71. We've got something called the M-21, which is a mothership to a parasitic aircraft. And then we've also got just our YF-12, which never actually went into production. But I want to highlight an article that's March 7th. I don't know if, can you see that, Jeremy? I don't know if you can. It's probably the 2 aircraft. Okay, no problem. So, yeah, so this is March 7th, 1990, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And the title is Going Out with a Boom. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but let me just hit you with a paragraph here. The Air Force SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance plane set off sonic booms across the nation as it sped record It set a speed record while flying into retirement. The plane flew from Los Angeles to Washington in 68 minutes, 17 seconds to become a new exhibit at the Smithsonian Institution. So this is 1990. They retired the Blackbird. And what has replaced the Blackbird? We've completely done away with our manned reconnaissance program. Are we only relying on satellites at this time? Can satellites really do the job? We talked about a little bit before that they have predictable orbits, and when they run out of fuel, they're useless. So just by default, it looks like we really do need a manned or unmanned reconnaissance program to supplement or complement the satellite program. Now, that brings us to something that I've had for quite a while now. And this is the crossword puzzle that I've put together. I'm going to see if I can minimize this screen here. Maybe I won't. Anyway, I've got a crossword puzzle here, and I'm offering a $5,000 cash prize for anyone who can solve this puzzle before 11:59 p.m. next Sunday night. I've got 116 clues. Not going to read them all, but let me hit you with just a couple, maybe 10 from this list here. Yeah, I can show it on the screen. Let me see if I can get back here. Okay. Whoops. Let's go back to this. Here we go. Okay. Let's go here. Okay. This is it right here. Okay. So that's what we're dealing with here. And I'm going to go with 70 down to 80 down. Here's one. Ben won this in 1989. Here's the next one. Ben's friendly rival. 72 down. The Skunkworks encourages these. 73. There is an error in the blank. 74. We will not get to the stars using this. These are all Lockheed Skunkworks Ben Rich related. Also F-117. 75 down. Lockheed ATB. So along with Northrop's B-2 stealth bomber program, Lockheed had their version of the ATB as well. They lost the program. 76, the Skunkworks employed these. 77, Kelly slide rule, AKA. 78, Skunkworks originally housed here. 79, used to verify hardness of Groom Lake. And 80, Ben won a bet with Kelly over this. So for anyone who can solve this puzzle before next Sunday at 11:59 p.m., $5,000 cash prize.
Well, you have to be a real serious researcher to know like the answers to those questions, or at least get enough of them where you could fill in the blanks and do it. So yeah, let's get it. Send me a link to that so I can post a link, and I'll post it in the description of this video down below so that people can take a shot at that and take a take a chance at that. That would be awesome. So
that sounds good.
So let's talk about Ben Rich, man.
Yep.
There's so much stuff that's been said about this guy, and some of the statements that he made about the capabilities and the programs that they were working on.
Correct.
This has been, a huge stepping stone that a lot of people have used to say that they're working on, and they have the warp drive technology, interstellar capability, and some of these other more exotic technologies that they're hiding inside of what essentially amounts to secret space programs, which is causing even more controversy now with Trump, creating a space force and with the military. Was he debriefed on something when he became president? Are they getting ready to release something, or there's lots of chatter among the internet about this. So.
Mm-hmm. So just so that everyone knows who we're talking about, here's a photo of Ben right here. That's the man we're talking about. Now, he took over the Skunkworks from Kelly Johnson between 1975 to 1991. And what's not really known is Kelly was brought out of retirement to consult on the Have Blue program. Not many people even are aware of that. I have a signed original photograph of the F-117 with Ben's signature on it over here on the right-hand corner. To John Andrews, best regards, Ben Rich.
Can you switch from screen share back to your
yep.
camera? Just click the screen share off right there.
Let's
That
see.
double rectangle window. Just click that again. It should
Click that again.
yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Now we can see you better.
Now you can see it. Okay.
Yes, much
Yep.
better.
So there it is right there. And just so that everyone knows, John Andrews was the senior project design engineer at Testers Model Corporation in San Diego, California. He was responsible for doing the sport model, the Lazar sport model. He did the SR-75 penetrator. He did the XR-7 Thunder Dart. He did the F-19 stealth low observable fighter that caused a huge wave through the halls of Congress when one of the senators held this thing up and said, I have a model of something that I can build, but I don't have access to. This is right around 85 timeframe. And that just, the phones just blew up, and it was a huge wave that he created. So that's who John Andrews was.
Right, because he's creating all these
Yep.
models for Testers Models Corporation, and they're geometrically identical to these top secret aircraft, and in ways that they like. You had to have access to something or pictures of the like some way of capability to be able to create such an accurate model. But you're saying he just did this through pictures, just having a picture of the aircraft. He had such a good innate knowledge of three-dimensional graphics and design that he could literally just take a picture and build a model from a picture.
Well, the way that he designed that stealth model is through sources that he interviewed, pilots, engineers, people who worked on C5 Galaxies. I mean, he never had any classified information. Now, John Andrews was a very reputable individual. He was certainly friends with Jim Goodall. He was friends with Ben Rich, and they would continually send letters back and forth. I've got some of the letters here. These are original letters. These are not copies. And basically, over a period of years, again, not by having any classified information, John was able to piece together what the F-117A stealth fighter actually looked like, Project Senior Trend. And he knew for a fact that it was a twin-engine aircraft. He knew it was single pilot. He knew it was tricycle landing gear. He knew that it had to fit within the cargo bay of a C5. Now, given those 4 or 5 little clues and interviewing people, this gentleman was able to put together what this thing looked like. It's just unbelievable. He was the original interceptor. John Andrews has got to get credit for being the person who's actually started the black aircraft research community. He's the first one. He's interceptor number 1. Now, when that thing was actually released, and then years later, when the F-117 stealth fighter was acknowledged by the Air Force on November the 10th of 1988, people said it didn't look like anything that John had built. It didn't bear like any resemblance to the faceted flat plate technology used on the F-117. And part of that is true. It looks different than the F-117 does. However, that's not to say anything bad about John. He actually had to kind of give the Air Force and Lockheed kind of the respect that they deserved. So he couldn't exactly match what the F-117 looked like, although he knew about the faceted flat plate technology. The model that he released had the smooth contouring curvature, unlike the F-117. So bottom line is, being as good as John was, he actually did know about the flat plates, but out of respect for Lockheed, he didn't incorporate those features into the model. And that's kind of the backstory on how that took place. But what I want to talk about here is another interesting statement made by Ben Rich, head of Skunkworks between 1975 to 1991. He passed away in 1995. In 93, he gave a lecture at the UCLA Alumni Club. Tom Keller and Jan Harzan were present, were physically there and saw Ben Rich at this lecture. And Tom told me that during this lecture, Ben said, quote, "Anything you can imagine the Skunkworks can do or has already done," end quote. Just the implications alone of what that means is staggering, just staggering. Here's another one here, Aerospace Pioneers. I've got the article right here, photo of Ben on it here. Ben Rich and the Skunkworks working on the edge. And here's Ben. Rich says he talking about the Einstein equations, quote, if the speed of light is truly limiting, I can't design spaceships to cross the universe. I won't accept that. So that's kind of interesting. What is Ben trying to say here? Talking about spaceships that cross the universe and the Skunkworks might be working on these programs. I think it's something we should consider. It's part of the research reference works.
I
You
would
know.
tend to agree. It's in there with the declassified Defense Intelligence Agency reports that show that they were studying these types of technologies and these types of capabilities with regards to Alcubierre's solutions to Einstein's
Mm-hmm.
partial equations. That they were doing warp drive research as recently as 10 years ago, still doing it into potentials of what that was directly related to the Pentagon's UFO program of trying to figure out, because the AATIP program, their advanced threat identification program, aerial threat identification program, basically in I did a podcast on this recently talking about how these technologies they just studied this stuff for trying to understand what is flying around out there and
Mm-hmm.
how it works. And but I agree. There's a lot of people out there that think that it goes well beyond just trying to understand it. That there's groups within the government that have already fully understand it and are even building it and producing these. Which is, I
Mm-hmm.
think everyone watching would agree that we have a collective dream as a group of people that, despite our differences, despite all the sorry, despite of all of our differences, and despite like what everyone, their opinions, we can all find common ground on the idea that we want to be able to build a craft ourselves. We want to understand this technology and be able to possess it and use it for our own purposes, and not just believe that this should be. I think we can all agree on that, and I think that's like sort of the common goal I want to unify people on here. That we're all trying to just sort out the disinformation from the real information and figure out, exactly how this works in the most efficient way possible. So,
Right.
yeah,
Okay, I've
sorry,
got another.
my
No, no problem. No problem.
I was
No problem.
talking and my audio was down. I turn it down so I can type and look up stuff and people won't hear it. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to move on to a couple of different black programs. Now I've got a document here. Not sure if you can see this. The reference for this is Defense Daily, July 14th, 1988, talking about black programs. Now it's interesting to keep in mind that the shorter the code name, the more deep the black program. So the shorter the code name, the more deep the black program. So quick example here. We've got Theme Castle, Senior Citizen, but then we have something called Omega. So Omega would be more classified than Theme Castle or Senior Citizen. And these things just go on and on and on. You can get this program element number is listed on the left-hand side. Then they list you, they give you what the program name is, and then there's no funding for this particular program because it's a black program. So basically you take the total amount, you subtract the knowns, and what you're left with is the unknown or black programs. And there's just, it goes on and on and on. There are so many different deep black programs that we have, there's no congressional oversight, there's no public scrutiny, so we don't even know what's going on with these programs. It's very hard to track actually what's taking place. Now, getting back to Ben Rich, I've got a letter here. This is on official Lockheed Company letterhead. This is dated July 8th, 1986. This is to John Andrews from Ben Rich. It says, Dear John, in response to your letter of July 1st, I am a believer, so is Kelly Johnson. This is in the subject of UFOs. So John Andrews is asking Ben Rich what his thoughts were about UFOs. And then basically, he goes on here. This is another letter from John Andrews to Ben Rich. This is July 10th, 1986, the copy of the letter here. It says, Dear Ben, a short note to clarify your interesting response regarding being a quote-unquote believer contained in your 8th July 1986 letter. The topic is UFO. I believe there are lots of UFOs. I am also tending to believe there are two categories: A, man-made UFOs, B, extraterrestrial UFOs. So basically he's asking Ben, which one are you a believer in, to clarify. So then he wrote back again. This is the original letter from Ben Rich to John Andrews, dated 7/21/86. This is Ben Rich speaking here. Dear John, yes, I'm a believer in both categories. I feel everything is possible. Many of our man-made UFOs were unfunded opportunities. In both categories, there are lots of kooks and charlatans. Be cautious, Ben Rich. So that's something that we need to pay attention to. There's a lot of people just trying to cash in on this, promoting completely whacked out stories that don't make any sense, have no historical background. And that's what this field is full of. So with this new channel that you've set up here, we want to pierce through some of that and get right to the truth.
Yes, and again, I'm glad to have you on the team. I tell people, like, it's like having data from Star Trek. You literally have the largest archive of UFO files and the biggest data that we could in the world, bar none. I don't think anyone could say that they have a larger collection than what you've accumulated over the years. And
well, just to follow up on that, there are a couple of places that do have probably more than I do. David Marler has a very big collection, probably more than I have. And then
wow.
there's a collection even bigger than David's collection that's in Sweden. It's called the Archives for the Unknown, and they have 4 buildings full of UFO magazines, audio tapes, videotapes, case files, drawings, reports. It's endless.
Wow.
There's 4 buildings full of this stuff. So that's another road trip we should take. Of course, we'll have to do it on an Airbus A380, but if you really want to dig real deep, that's the place to go. They have more than anyone in the world within the private sector.
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, so probably. I mean, I was a little off, but
No, that's
thank you
fine.
for
That's fine.
clarifying that. So
No
that's
problem. No
amazing
problem.
because we need to take that data, but it's not just about the data. That's what you've learned that from what the NSA does is they collect everything and they listen to everything and they record it all. But their problem then is analysis and sorting out that how do you sort through all the crap to find the gems. You know what I mean? So that's
Right.
that's the hard part, and that's why what we're trying to do here with what we're doing is assembling the dream team, the ultimate investigative team, the ultimate force to investigate this stuff, and putting together all the best minds, the people who have the right idea about this, and especially where it relies on the experimental method. I want to go to your lab, I want to go to it on our road trip, and I want to see these results and film them and show others how to replicate them, and
Right.
that's the idea behind it. So,
Okay.
sorry.
So when we started, no problem. When we started this podcast or this presentation here, I promised that I would drop some new material, and I want to fulfill that promise right now. To my knowledge, this has never been released before, so I'm going to hit you with it right here, right now. I don't think it's ever been released. This is part of the John Andrews collection. Here's the actual copy of the letter right here. And this is from Ben Rich to Lee Graham. He used to work on the U-2 spy plane long time ago, like the original Skunkworks. Somewhere around, probably would have been 59, 60, somewhere in that time frame. Okay, so just going to hit you with this here. May 8th, 1991, from Lee Graham to Ben Rich, and I'm going to read the whole letter. I received your letter of April 25th, 1991, with enclosures. In response to your question regarding sending my letters to David North, I would like you not to send them to Aviation Week. The following are my reasons, and this is interesting. This is Ben Rich talking about here. Number 1, Kelly Johnson is not alive to speak for himself, so I would like to protect his privacy and name. Number 2, lots of people like to use Kelly's or my name to give themselves credibility. Number 3, many times my comments are taken out of context. Being outspoken, I've gotten myself in trouble. Number 4, I don't remember ever telling Andrews I knew what snowbird was other than seeing it in John's letter. And then Ben goes on to say here, I would like to clarify the context behind my letters to John Andrews. Kelly and I discussed, Kelly Johnson, former head of the Lockheed Skunkworks. He's the one who started it. Kelly and I discussed UFOs several times. We always believe that as engineers and scientists, we should keep an open mind on any phenomenon. We always thought, why should we be the only creatures in our universe? Why shouldn't there be UFOs? We were never privy to the Blue Book data, so we said, why not? Everything is possible. And we never saw anything to disprove them. So that was the background to my comments to John Andrews. My mind is still open to this day, and I repeat that Kelly and I were never privy to or party to any UFO study. I'll swear to that. I have read a lot of material from numerous sources, mainly Andrews, but I was never directly involved. Sorry, I can't be of more help. Ben Rich. So, according to Ben, he was open to the subject of UFOs. Why shouldn't there be? But according to Ben, he was never, and Kelly were never privy to or were a party to a secret UFO study, and he wasn't familiar with the Blue Book files. That's what I'm getting out of this letter. What are your thoughts, Jeremy?
Well, that's interesting because he seems to be also making. He also made some comments that some of the things he said have been taken out of context or
Right,
twisted around,
right.
which makes me think he was talking about those statements about the we can bring ET home and
Hmm.
anything you can imagine we've already done it and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like that's almost it almost seems like he's saying that because obviously he's saying in that letter he's saying that he wasn't connected in any program that really worked with bringing ET home, physically, but or anything related to that. But yet he made the claim that they have the technology to be able to do these things.
Hmm.
It's
You would think
interesting.
that if crash retrievals were real, like if Aztec was real, if Kingman was real, if these alleged crash retrievals actually took place, wouldn't he be the one to look at the debris, to look at the propulsion system, he
Right.
and Kelly? But he's saying that that's not the case. So what it leads me to believe is that a lot of this is just good old fashioned American ingenuity. F-117, it's just good old fashioned American ingenuity. Engineers getting down in the trenches, getting boots on the ground, doing the research, doing all the radar cross-section materials and all the physical equations that actually make these aircraft. It doesn't look like there's any alien connection that it's been talked about for so long, that a lot of these things have
Right, and
alien propulsion system.
I've gone
Yeah.
back and forth on this myself. I said in that last thing about, well, Roswell, like, or any of these crashes, and the recovered debris, did we learn this stuff from aliens? And I had this debate too, like why did they discover why were fiber optics discovered before computers? Like you'd think these fiber optics would come after computers, but they were discovered before computers. And I've been going on and on about this, like the whole history of invisibility cloaks and metamaterials and quasicrystals. And it really looks, from the research that I've done, I mean, all the stuff that I've done into Corso's claims about the transistor and solid state electronics, that was all in physical theory. Like they had the physics that those scientists knew and were working on at the time was exactly the science they needed to understand how to build that transistor. And there is no evidence that ingenuity came from studying anything but solid state physics and electronics
There
and,
you
and stuff.
go. There you go. But
And the same
remember,
thing
go ahead, go
with
ahead.
metamaterials and the whole history of that. We go back to the wallpaper coating that was put on the U-2 spy plane, one of the first metamaterials that was used for stealth radar and visibility. And then you go through the evolution of all of it through the rate calculating the radar cross sectional area to developing the
Hmm.
flat plated design of the F-117 stealth fighter, all the way to the more advanced types of discovery of metamaterials, how it evolved from just the grid meshes of these of the olden days to the more complicated designs and fractal antennas and fractal metamaterial arrays that they have now and that they're doing experiments on. And I really tend to lean toward the side of human ingenuity that, if we studied these things and got these pieces that were reverse engineered from aliens, we'd see much more clear, distinct jumps in the technology at key times that would be beyond an explanation of I guess inductive logical reasoning from the science that we understood or have understood at the time, and it seems to be a progression. But we're close. Regardless of that, we're close. We're very,
Hmm.
very, very close. We're on the brink. We're on that threshold, about ready to push over that edge. Which is why I remain. I'm hopeful about all the claims, that I've talked to these people that want to be the focus of of season one of UFO Road Trip, to be focused on the Biefeld-Brown effect and the electric universe proponents. But the skeptic in me and the rationalist says it is probably a misinterpretation of coronal ion wind phenomenon, as the skeptics and mainstream scientists are saying. As if it weren't, if this really was the key to warp drive or in anti-gravity technology, that we would have discovered it and made a breakthrough already a long time ago. And how could they have kept it? Like we said, we discussed this, and I go back and forth on this all the time. The 1950s, the mid 1950s. Let's talk about what happened back then, that with all these programs, because you said that there was a lot of government research into Biefeld-Brown effect and as a method of propulsion, and then all of a sudden everything just stopped, and it's almost like that point it all went black and it went into the black world, as if some kind of major discovery or breakthrough was achieved. Yet I think about that explanation and really wonder in my mind, if they made that breakthrough back in mid 1950s, 1954, 1955, then
Hmm.
how they kept it secret for so long, and or whatever, if it was really that easy, or if, as we've seen, like, maybe it isn't that easy. Maybe they're still looking for it and they're still doing research on it, like that recent defense. If it really was just Biefeld-Brown effect, why did they have that recent Defense Intelligence Agency where they're looking into all these other forms of anti-gravity, like superconductor anti-gravity, and all these other ideas? Unless that's just disinformation to be thrown in, that they threw in as just part of the mix. It's quite the puzzle, man. I love it.
You were talking, Jeremy, earlier about debris, and that's something I want to follow up on. I want to take a step back in reverse here and talk about something that ufology, I don't think they're really thinking about this. Now, we hear so many discussions about UFO crash retrievals and that they got the debris, right? They got the debris. And Major Jesse Marcel, he said that it couldn't be cut, it couldn't be burned, you couldn't tear it, you couldn't rip it with a knife. Now, wait a minute. If you couldn't cut the debris, then how did you get a piece of it? Wouldn't that still be part of the main craft itself? How did this debris come about? If you couldn't cut it and you couldn't break it and you couldn't burn it, how did they get all these small pieces of it separated from the main craft itself? So to me, that raises a red flag. It just doesn't even make sense, right? If they keep on saying that this stuff was impervious to everything, you couldn't put a diamond chip drill bit in this thing, yet we've got all these boxes full of this debris that came from the original craft itself. Shouldn't that still be part of the main craft if you can't cut this? This just doesn't make
Yeah,
sense to me.
especially with a diamond bit, or what, water,
Right.
like a water jet. Like water jet cuts anything. Water jet will cut an engine block in half. Like
Yeah. Right.
it's
Right.
like, like there's got to be something that cuts this stuff in half. And then again, what type of material is it? Because even like all the research that's being done at NASA right now into super solar sails and stuff, the ultimate in material science technology right now, for what they can see theoretically, is graphene. And even graphene would be, you could still cut that with a diamond. it's just as hard. It's the same. It's the same
Mhm.
level of hardness. So it's like, so you could still drill it with or cut it with a diamond. So again, yeah, there's certain things of that parts of those stories that don't make sense, and but
Doesn't
there's
that kind of point to a man-made origin to something? If you if you found dozens of small pieces of it in a field somewhere, that really leads me to believe we're looking at something man-made here. If it just was spread out for a quarter mile and three-quarters of a mile long, all this debris that they had to have 50 men, go down on hands and knees, crisscrossing the debris field for like 3 days at a time. If this was an alien spacecraft, wouldn't this thing be integrated? Why do we have these stories of all this debris being shipped on B-29s?
Also, you think about, from a Star Trek perspective, if there was some kind of Star Trek civilization, monitoring us, and they sent one of their craft down, and for some reason it did get smashed and blown to bits, and spread over
Hmm.
quite a large debris field. You'd think that they would have some kind of retrieval efforts that would be faster and more efficient than ours, even, to kind of like retrieve that and cover it up. Like the aliens themselves, right before we could get a hold of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just
no one came back. No one came back to pick up the quote unquote aliens. They left their brothers out in the
right, the
desert.
four body,
No one came
and another
back.
thing about the four bodies too, with the
Yeah.
if they were going to. If they really found four alien bodies out in the desert, they would preserve them in formaldehyde. And why would they call and order these four small-sized caskets? They wouldn't put them in caskets and bury them in the ground. That's not what you do with like a speed. You would put these things in formaldehyde and you would preserve them and keep them to study as long as possible and preserve that. You wouldn't just put them in child caskets and bury them. You know what I mean? So
There,
like, why
yeah,
order
there's
the
something.
caskets? Why, like I could see them ordering, like neoprene or big plastic bins of some sort of plastic that would they could store the bodies in or something. But uh,
Yeah, there's something we're not being told about the Roswell incident, and that's on purpose. Absolutely. There's something we're not being told, um, that we're being led down a path, I guess would be the best way to say it. Now, let's move on here. I have another letter from Jim Goodall. Now, Jim Goodall is another black aircraft researcher. He is one of the original interceptors. He was very good friend with Ben Rich. And this is a letter to Ben from Jim Goodall, dated 13 August 1993. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I think it's important, so let's keep it in mind here. This is the letter right here. Okay, so here is Jim Goodall's letter. I have a proposal for you, talking to Ben Rich. This is in the interest of history and for the future. There are a lot of things that you cannot write about in your book, but nevertheless are of great importance to aviation designers of the 21st century and beyond. What I am requesting is the following. So here's Jim proposing this, pitching this idea to Ben Rich. Number one, I would like to do a taped video interview with you sometime in the near future. Ben passed away in 95. This was written in 93. We would cover everything that you have ever been involved in with your many years at Lockheed Skunkworks. We would cover all bases, leaving nothing out. You would have possession of the tape interview until your death. At that time, the tape would be sent to me. If you wanted a waiting period before I did anything with the tape, I would agree with that. The reason I'm making this request is twofold. I'm a historian and can't imagine letting the important work that you and the men and women of the Skunkworks have accomplished over the last 50 years die with you. If I don't make the request, who would? I've had extensive interviews with Lou, Jim Eastham, Bob Gilliland, Bill Sklier, Ben Balls, just to name a few. The Lockheed Advanced Development Company is my passion. It has been my passion for over 30 years. I would promise you that nothing revealed in your interview would ever be shared with anybody else unless you gave me the exclusion, such as that son of a bitch from Testers, my dearest friend John Andrews. I would not in any way jeopardize what you stand for or your security status, but this project should be done. You have way too much to share with the world and future Jim Goodalls. Ben, I hope to hear from you soon. Cheers, James Goodall. Now, here's the thing. Jim Goodall was proposing a non-holds-barred interview with Ben Rich, where Ben could just let it all hang out. Talk about the Skunkworks, everything they did on F-117 program, all the deep black programs associated with that program and follow-on programs, and he was going to leave nothing out. According to Jim Goodall, Ben actually agreed to do this, but he passed away before it could take place. So we lost an entire portion of our national history. And Jeremy, here's the thing, that in many cases, the customer, like the Air Force or the CIA, if they pay for a program, they own the rights to the material, all the drawings, all the blueprints, all the diagrams, all the photographs. And if they say to scrap it, Lockheed, by law, they must dump it. They shredded who knows how many pallets full of all these deep black programs. We'll never hear about it again. It's lost to history. It's gone. A lot of these programs, they were born black, they died black, and you'll never hear anything about it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy to know. Yeah. And the other one too, me and Dan go back and forth on is the TR3B, and what the heck that was, and then why the day at, like literally the two days after Ed Fouché died, that whole fake patent came out, that was promoted by all these other channels that tend to promote a lot of disinformation, and that whole UFO patent was all Biefeld Brown. It was a giant blimp that flew around on Biefeld Brown effect, and they just cut. And then like most of the stuff you search for with the TR3B now, you find that patent and stuff related to that. You don't even find the mercury plasma drive or anything about the superconductors or the anti-gravity stuff. It's all like this it's all Biefeld Brown. And I just thought that was interesting. It's almost like if Biefeld Brown was this key to warp drive and anti-gravity technology, why would they, use that to why would they replace, that whole thing with that and do that? Why did that happen? And is there a nefarious reason behind whoever put that patent out and pushed that idea? Or maybe maybe there was a version of this craft that was an inflatable dirigible that used Biefeld Brown ion wind effect or something to move around, as it says in the patent. So it's hard to say, because I go back and forth with Dan on what the TR3B and whether it was a real craft or not that actually existed, because it's you can't find anything. It's hidden. If it is, it's hidden so well in the deep black world that you never get at it almost. But there are certain things about it that would almost make me be more believable, especially that 600-foot operational model, like the model that he had. That's such an enormous size of a thing. It would almost make more sense to me that it would be like an inflatable kind of craft. But I still. It's hard to say with everything that goes on about what
the timing is suspect, right? The timing is suspect because, just like you mentioned, just after Ed's passing, this drops, right? Very interesting timing. Okay, I've got another bombshell for you, Jeremy. This is a letter to Ben Rich from John Andrews. This is a copy of the original letter. This is dated 14 August 1981, so real early. Yeah. Ben Rich, you're responsible for two very strange birds leaving at dawn just as first light from George Air Force Base. One white, one gray, said to be very Lippish-like, good acceleration, good climb, don't loiter around George Air Force Base and not seen for rest of day. Attached sketch may or may not be accurate. Could it be Code 85 birds might be into a base as relatively open as George Air Force Base? Could it be that would be the last place I would look for them? Could it be that's where they are? And this is John Andrews. So here is the world exclusive. This is a sketch of a black aircraft originally done by Jim Goodall and then cleaned up by John Andrews. And this is what this thing looked like here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's what this bird looked like. And I've got a little bit better illustration here. Here's a color illustration of what this thing looks like. So some type of a flying wing configuration with a vertical stabilizer, which would not have been the most stealthy aircraft in the world. But apparently something like this flew, and it might have been a Lockheed Bird. It's never been released, never been talked about. I've never seen like this in aviation literature. Any aviation historian, no one has ever talked about this series of aircraft.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that.
No problem. No problem. Okay, now, one other thing I want to talk about here too is when we were talking a little bit earlier about the different Blackbirds within the Blackbird family, there's one called the M21 that has a D21 drone on top of it. Now, this is an event that took place July 1966, about 250 miles west of the coast of San Diego, somewhere around 80,000 feet at Mach 3, where they were doing a test of this D21 drone. And so you've got the mothership, you've got the parasitic aircraft. They launch the parasitic aircraft off the spine of the M21, about 3 feet off the back of the spine of the M21. And then there's an unstart within the inlet of the D21, an asymmetrical unstart. And this thing slams down right onto the Blackbird and breaks this thing into two. Bill Parks survived. He punched out, but then the other co-pilot, Mr. Torek, he drowned later. So we lost one test pilot. And this is something I don't think it's ever been illustrated. All we have is a kind of a grainy color motion picture film reel of this event. To my knowledge, no one has ever done a decent illustration of this event. And here we've got it right here, showing the D21 crashing into the M21. This is 1966. So at that point, they stopped launching from this and they put them on the B-52s at that time. Yep. Now, switching gears. We need to talk about, Jeremy, some of the classified programs going on at Groom Lake Area 51. Now, it's important to keep in mind that Area 51, the actual terminology is Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3, is the actual terminology for Area 51. It's a detachment of Edwards Air Force Base, Detachment 2. And I've got an article here. Here's the original article. This is Las Vegas Review-Journal, March 20th, 1994. Groom Lake toxic burning alleged. A former worker at the secret Air Force Base says poisonous substance were routinely ignited. And certainly not going to go into the whole article here, but what they talk about is every Monday and every Wednesday, 2 times per week, there were these large, 2 of these things, tractor trailers that pulled up to Burbank Skunkworks, and they offloaded, these 55-gallon drums were put onto these 2 18-wheeler tractor trailers. And these things were full of toxic resins, substances, chemicals, radar-absorbent materials, epoxies, things that would make a stealth aircraft very low observable. Now, think about this. They started in Burbank. They drove all the way to Area 51. That's a long drive, all the way to Area 51. And they offloaded these 55-gallon drums into these trenches at Area 51. And then they would fill the trenches with these 55-gallon drums with diesel fuel. And then a gentleman would light this huge torch and he'd throw that thing into these trenches, and the whole thing went up in smoke and flames. And all this acrid smoke would be going from the quote unquote burn pits over the residential area at Area 51, where all the workers were. Here you can see where the map is showing you where the residential people were. And I've got a photograph of Area 51 in the 1960s. Here's a photograph of Area 51. You can see the A-12 hangars. And then over here on this map, somewhere off the page in this location right here, this is where the burn pits are. And that's where a lot of this OSHA things took place, where there were lawsuits because all this black acrid smoke of the toxic radar absorbent materials was going over to where these guys were sleeping. And so they were violating a lot of these OSHA requirements. Now, just to see what kind of extravagant living they were doing at Area 51. I'm going to hit you with some of the things that were going on here. Sam's Place was the bar at Area 51. To my knowledge, it's still there. There is still a Sam's Place there. Okay, so describe what Sam's Place was. Sam's Place was a dark, fully carpeted nightclub at Area 51 with large padded chairs and a bar ringed with stools that rivaled the largest ones in Las Vegas, the source said. The bar and many of the facilities probably still exist. The club had 4 pool tables, dartboards, and a big screen where pornographic movies were shown until a few ladies on the base complained. Okay. The recreational complex was complete with an 8-lane bowling alley, a heated indoor pool, 4 racquetball courts, a basketball gymnasium with a wooden floor, tennis courts, saunas, and a snack bar. At one time, a golf course and lighted softball field existed. Then they said sometimes people would chip in and buy big ice boxes of shrimp that were flown specially to the base from Florida in 20 to 30 big styrofoam coolers. The plane stopped at the base only long enough to offload the shrimp, he said. Some colonels, he said, had very extravagant tastes, including one who had grapefruits flown in from Israel at $25 a piece and requested deliveries of canned tuna from South America that he estimated cost the government $26 per can. The dark bottled water to the tune of $50,000 a month, comparing lifestyles to some of the high rollers in Las Vegas. So this is just some of the things that were going on at Area 51 at taxpayers' expense. Yeah, all under the radar. Now, I've got another document here. This is from John Andrews. Talking about Groom Lake and what was actually going on within the burn pits. I don't think this has ever been talked about. Quote, a material with a nickname of, quote, cow dung. It is an asbestos-based material that served to heat shield fuel tanks areas of Mach 3 machines. It was applied over access maintenance panels and had to be cut away. Thickness varied between 3/4 of an inch. How disposed of, I don't know. Magnesium thorium, maybe you can comment on this, Jeremy. Magnesium thorium used in fairings of various aircraft flown at both Groom and Nellis Air Force Base F-105s. Another one, depleted uranium, used for control surface counterbalances and balance weights in flight testing. Magnesium thorium and depleted uranium are both mildly radioactive. So when you put this together, this quote unquote cow dung, with the toxic burning materials that were at the burn pits from the radar absorbent materials and epoxy resins, now you can see all the lawsuits that were going on at Area 51 that OSHA didn't even have access to, and all this internal fighting within the government and the skunk workers. This has been going on for decades. So can you tell us, Jeremy, maybe you can comment on magnesium thorium and depleted uranium?
Well, depleted uranium is, of course, it's a super high density metal. It's used for armor penetrating rounds, like tank armor penetrating rounds, because it's such a heavy and dense. Well, it's not just heavy; it's density. It's such a dense metal that it actually is has a high penetration velocity. It will go right through steel because it's just so much more dense than steel. It has a very hard penetration for a projectile. That's so you mentioned it being used as the coatings for these fine balances, and that's again, you have these fine balances, and they have to part of creating a balance is in physics is about something called I value, or specific gravity. We call I value, and there's ways to calculate it, but basically, if you want to maximize the calculation for your I value, you want a very heavy a very heavy object in a very concentrated amount of space on the end of a very infinitely thin or lightweight, almost non-existent stick that holds it there. That's basically.
Okay.
And so I would say that's probably why they would use these types of metals. It looks like this. I've never heard. I don't know too much about the. What was this? thorium.
The other one?
The thorium,
Yeah.
the thorium magnesium.
Magnesium,
But it
thorium.
looks like an aircraft aluminum, like an aircraft alloy, not aluminum, but an you know, an alloy that's used in a lot of parts and manufacture for whatever reason. It seems I looked it up, and that's what came up as a lot of. In fact, we got a picture of the M21 here.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. I again, thorium is radioactive. The magnesium's not. There may be some isotopes that are radioactive, but thorium, it would be the radioactive element, and that would definitely be radioactive. Um, so I know there was a lot of stuff burned, also like barium titanate that was used in a lot of the invisibility cloaks and the paints that were used in a lot of the stealth technology. They painted with barium titanate paint, and those materials were also burned in that pit, in those burn pits, and related to those lawsuits and the OSHA violations and stuff. So
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's it. Okay, I want to talk about another world exclusive here. This is almost never talked about. This is kind of forgotten history here. I want to reference my source, Aviation Week Space Technology, August 24th, 1992. United 747 crew reports near collision with mysterious supersonic aircraft. The crew described a lifting body configuration that looked like the forward fuselage of an SR-71. Here's the actual article here from Aviation Week Space Technology. And what we're dealing with here is an 747 departed Los Angeles, LAX, going toward London's Heathrow Airport. They took up a magnetic 220-degree heading. This is where the aircraft was flying a magnetic 220-degree heading. And some kind of a strange spade-shaped lifting body configuration flew between 500 and 1,000 feet below the 747. Now, the pilot of the 747 and the co-pilot, they both got a very quick view of this thing, maybe 3 to 5 seconds. They said it was going supersonic. So the closure rate could have been something like 1,500 miles an hour, well over 1,000 miles an hour. I was given access to the Bill Scott collection. Here is the original report of what this aircraft looked like. Not sure if you can see it here. Here's the original sketch of what this bird looks like. I don't think this has ever been seen before. So we've got, and we were talking about Lockheed. This could have been one of those birds that Lockheed actually built during the F-117 program that's never been talked about. Here's the cleaned up drawing that I put together of what this thing actually looks like, and it gives you a good top view of what this bird looks like. So you've got one air intake on either side of the center line of the aircraft, and then these canted vertical stabilizers inward, and we've got the 747 going from LAX to London's Heathrow Airport. Now, what did this thing actually look like? Here is the illustration we came up with of what this bird looked like as it was flying below the 747. The pilot's view from the cockpit would have looked something like this right here, as this thing's flying at 1,000 miles an hour, 500 feet below the 747. So just to give an enlargement here, this is what we think this bird actually looks like. Some kind of a lifting body, forward fuselage of the SR-71. And the date again on this is 8/6/1992, is the actual August 5th, 1992. LAX to London is where they were going. So that's another case that's almost never talked about.
Volume back up. You've never found any kind of craft in your research that matches that or looks anything like it. Looks like Michael had a little hang up. I was trying to bring Dan on this call too. I don't know what happened to him. We'll try and give him a call again and see if we can't get. Oh, looks like Michael's back. Michael, you there?
Not quite like that. Not quite like that. That's never talked about. That's almost never even discussed. Now, we've been hearing a lot of talk about these. Yep, it's fine.
Yeah, you're skipping around a little bit. Now you're back. Now you're back smooth again. Sorry. I don't know what's going on. The stream health. They don't like us talking about this kind of stuff, Michael.
I don't know.
Yeah, the breathing masks will protect you from radiation, guys. You breathe that stuff in, it doesn't come
Yep,
out of
I'm
your
here.
lungs.
I'm
Just so you know.
still.
Yeah, we see you. You
Yep,
seem to be like
the
skipping in
OSHA.
and out.
Just, One quick story I want to relate from Jim Goodall. This is when the B-2 was being flown into Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, early in the B-2 program. There was one case where they brought this B-2 into the hangar and they shut the hangar door for the night. And when they went to open up the hangar the next morning, every living creature within that hangar was dead on the floor. So all the bugs, all the flies, all the little spiders, they had succumbed to the radar material toxic fumes that auto and seeping out of this aircraft. It's very dangerous when you deal with these radar absorbent materials.
Wow. It's like a double-edged sword. The trade-off. You know, you have this
Right.
cutting edge on stealth technology and radar, surpassing enemy radar technology, but at the same time it's toxic. This toxic stuff that's. I remember when they had the SR-71s the F-117s at the air show, because I used to go to the air show every year growing up. There was one a big one out in Westover Air Force Base, and there's another one down in Rhode Island there at the Air Force Base down there too. But I remember like they used to have the F-117s and it was roped off with armed guards standing around the thing.
Yeah,
They wouldn't even let you
that's
get
right.
they wouldn't let you get close to it. You couldn't see inside the cockpit. They wouldn't let you get even close to the craft. And there were signs saying that they would use lethal force if you crossed the line and try to like go near the craft. They'd just shoot you. Like it was pretty intense. But I remember looking at that paint that was on that craft and the way that it looked. It was the only thing I've ever seen that really reminded me of it is you ever seen Vanta Black? I saw
Not
some.
sure.
I saw some of this stuff at this place down in Connecticut. I've actually the first time I saw in person, but it's like a this black material that absorbs like a ridiculous amount of the incident light that's shined on it. It's like the blackest material known to exist because it absorbs so much light. It's literally the blackest material, I guess. Um, and looking at that stuff reminded me a lot of like what just the way that radar absorbent paint, what it did to the light, you know, the effect that it had on the light that was hitting it. So interesting
Sure,
stuff.
sure. One other program I wanted to talk about here is when you discuss hypersonic aircraft, anything beyond Mach 5 is a hypersonic aircraft. We always hear that it's a 75-degree swept wing configuration. I mean, anything less than 75 degrees, you're just going to shred those wings off, right? So you've got to have at least 75-degree swept wing configuration. And within the black world, they always give these things nicknames. One's called the Zipper. I've got one here. This is the original sketch part of the Bill Scott collection. It's called the Accelerator, and it's approximately 150 feet in length, Mach 14, something called the Accelerator. So wouldn't it be great if we could see this thing come alive in color? So here's what we came up with here. This is the Accelerator, some type of a manned hypersonic program. Could be Mach 14, could be Mach 15, kind of a wave rider configuration. Again, 75-degree swept wing configuration. So this might be this Black World secret space program, one facet of that Black World program.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, you know, we have people going back and forth saying, you know, well, you know, what replaced the SR-70? You know, what SR-71 when they retired it, and people saying, "Oh, they're still using the U-2 and stuff
Hmm.
too." But like, they've got to have stuff that's beyond. I talked to some people that I know write a lot of reports for write the consultants and who write the reports for the the studies that are done by the Pentagon into like the future of technology. And one of the recent ones is that I read was on drones, and it just
Hmm.
like the move. I really think like they're doing so much more with unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and drone technology. I think that a lot of these things are they have such crazy maneuverability and that because they're not designed to fly a human pilot. When you have to design something to hold a human and support a human life support system, for a human, it limits your G force. How many G's a human being can
Right.
undergo
Right.
without passing out. Um,
Life support. You've got all the air that you have to supply to a pilot, all the life support, all the seat ejection. And you were talking about the U-2. If there's a crisis, if there's another Cuban Missile Crisis, but it's over in Iran, do you think we're going to wait to send a U-2 all the way to Iran? Like there's got
No,
to
they
be
need
something
two
else
hour.
out there.
Right? They
Yeah.
said they need that 2 hour capability where
Right.
they can reach any point on the planet and photograph it within 2 hours and have that
Yeah, that's
type
it.
of
That's it.
intelligence.
That's
And
it.
that's where we're at. They have these craft, and I think that one of the ways that they've a lot of the research that has you're looking back to the 60s and stuff or where they were at, and a lot of the research that they did was super high altitude craft. It's flying in the upper atmosphere where they're
Hmm.
literally there's not much atmosphere up there, and you're literally just you're rocket propelled and you're bouncing off the top of the atmosphere basically at that point. But there's been a lot of research that's been done into super high altitude craft, and these that's how you reach Mach 14. You can never do Mach 14 at sea level. you know
And the other question to ask too is, if you have a very fast hypersonic aircraft, you'd create a sonic boom, right? And you'd be able to track where this thing is coming from, where it's going. The sonic boom footprint would give it all away. So wouldn't it be great if we had the technology fielded now and deployed where we could minimize or reduce or eliminate our sonic boom footprint within our Black World aircraft? I've got a report here. This is kind of a hard to get document, but this is AIAA technical document number 6824, and it's called Electroaerodynamics in Supersonic Flow, Northrop Corporation. Within this document, they describe how you use these electrostatic flows within the flow itself to reduce or eliminate your sonic boom footprint. So they've already got the technology. It's a done deal, Jeremy. They can fly supersonically now, create no sonic boom. It's a done deal. They already figured it out. Way back in 68 timeframe, they already did it.
Wow. So
Yep.
you use basically electrogravitics. And they were using electrogravitics. That's why one of my original video on Biefeld Brown back in the day talked about how the X1, the Chuck Yeager flew. The nose cone literally had electric charge. It was charged to a really high electrostatic potential, and that reduced the bow shock on the front of the aircraft, which allowed them to break the sound barrier in the first place. But you're saying they've taken that a step. I'd love to take a look at that document and then some of
Oh
the
yeah.
science in
Oh
there.
yeah. Let me read you the abstract real quick here. The research presented in this paper pertains to the effects of electrostatic fields on a charged flow or fluid about a body. The phenomenon was studied with wind tunnel tests by hydraulic and analogy tests. The results indicate that electrostatic forces can alter the flow pattern of a fluid, and it may be possible to attenuate the sonic boom. In addition, if the sonic boom is decreased, there may also be a wave drag reduction. There you go, right there. They have absolutely done it. If we're hearing about it now and you pump in billions of dollars of classified money into these programs, Northrop figured it out. So You could perhaps take a B-2, make it go supersonic, no sonic boom, or any other aircraft by using this technology here.
Interesting. I wonder, again, I would love to know more about just the dynamics and the physics of how that works.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It gets a little technical. I mean, I can't understand the whole thing about the document, but I know enough to extrapolate that they were working about these charged flow fields within the aerodynamic flow. And if we're reading about it now, and this is 68, and you throw in these billions of dollars, it's a done deal. I mean, they are so far ahead of what you could see at your local air show. I mean, the joke is on us, really. These guys are good. The NSA, the NRO, the CIA, working conjunction on these programs, they are decades ahead. Even Ben Rich said before he passed away, Jim, we have things in the Nevada desert that are 50 years beyond what you could comprehend. If you've seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. Coming directly from Ben Rich. This is literally days before he passed away in 95. So coming from Ben Rich, you can bank on it.
Yeah, I would say. Very interesting stuff, man. Again, this is we paid for this, man, and this belongs to us.
Yeah.
That's what gets me the most is that this belongs to us, and that we have to put together such an effort and to just to get what's ours back. You know what I mean? It's like,
if you think about Germany, the implications of what this means for the civilian airliner industry, they're talking about decreasing the sonic boom footprint or attenuating it completely and getting rid of the wave drag. That means you could possibly increase the efficiency on airliners, what, 10, 30, 40, 50% increase in efficiency over what we have now.
do you know
And
what's
it's not
happening?
being used.
Do you even know what's
Yeah.
happening with Uber? Uber has a whole new division called Uber Elevate that they've created,
Okay.
where they're developing. Uber is now developing air taxis. They want in the future to have an Uber air taxi in every city that can
Yeah.
literally go pick you up by helicopter and fly you
Yeah.
like anywhere across the city.
Yeah.
With all automated flight control lanes. They have a whole plan for this, man.
Yeah.
It's Uber Elevate, and check it out. Like, this is like going to be the future. Is there are going to be drones, like drone helicopters, literally flying people everywhere. They're going to do away with all the cars and congestions in cities. Hopefully,
Right.
eventually, it will all be
More
battery
power.
powered, super fast rechargeable. These copters that they use battery power. They fly it from this point to that point, and then they go recharge. Go pick
Yeah.
up the next guy, and there'd be hundreds of thousands of these things literally taking people to their commutes or picking them up. Or people that sitting in traffic that are tired of sitting in traffic. They finally like, all right, I'm getting an Uber Elevate to, get me out of this.
It's about time. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's about time. It's crazy that it hadn't happened sooner, but yeah, the rechargeable battery technology is huge. Wireless, even now we have an application, like a real good solid application for wireless power transfer. Wireless power transfer with some of that Tesla technology being able,
Right.
if they were to be able to harness that and power these things, because I always worry about like if the batteries fail all the time and things, batteries wear out, that they burn out over time and stuff, and you can't really. I mean, if you're trusting a battery pack with like a helicopter, man, it's like you gotta kind of have like, I don't know. It seems like there needs to be a lot of safety involved in that, but who knows, man? This is the future, and it's really crazy what's going to happen and take off in the next couple of years, especially if we get somewhere with our investigation and get some of these technologies out of the black world into the light world again. If we're able to, like, I'd love to see. That always bugs me is like, if this Bifeldt Brown and all this stuff's legit, like such a great form of anti-gravity, how come the best thing I've seen are these really super lightweight lifters that don't do
Yeah.
much. And how come there's no aerospace companies like actively working to develop in this and building aircraft with it? That's really we're going to want to see. Why isn't Uber Elevate? Why aren't these scientists and engineers that they hired looking into this kind of stuff? That
Well, I
if
mean,
it's so legit, and if
we're
it's
we're still left with this obsolete technology, right? This year we're 50-year anniversary of the 747. It takes 11 hours to fly from Phoenix to Heathrow. You're just chugging along at 520 miles an hour. It takes that long. With this technology we just talked about, they could go supersonic, no sonic boom footprint, and you could be there in what? Half the time? Maybe less than that. But it's not being used. It's in the black world. It's not being trickled down to the civilian industry or the general aviation industry. And that's the tragedy of the whole thing.
right, and that's kind of what I want to do with this project is find a way using science and just I've given up on disclosure. Like we can't trust anything the government tells us. Anytime anyone starts talking about disclosure, you just like know that it's going to be disinformation and that you're getting set up for a lie. It's almost like that's what it feels like to me anyway. Seeing all these things that have happened, so I'd really love to see Discovery. That's kind of where I'm leaning toward. It's going to happen with Discovery. We've discovered it ourselves in these black programs that our tax dollars paid for, and we're going to have to rediscover this technology ourselves in the light world and bring it out that way.
Right. That's right. Yep.
So that's where I'm at with that. I was hoping Dan would join us and get on. I invited him and tried to get him in on this call, but I don't know what's going on with him. I'm sure I'll talk to him later on about this. Michael, why don't you continue?
Sure, we can do like one more here. Okay, this is one that I don't think has been talked about either. This is something that's fairly rare, and I've done a little bit of cleanup here. It looks, Jeremy, that there's something out there, and we'll just do one more here. There's something called the A-16, believed to be a Northrop program, and this is a stealthy high-speed attack aircraft. And what I want to highlight is that this bird, it has drooped wingtips that can be controlled by the pilot, and it has thrust vectoring. So the drooped wingtips in conjunction with the thrust vectoring make this thing maneuver, Jeremy, like a missile. This thing is extremely aerodynamically maneuverable. And this is the full color illustration of this bird that we put together, showing what this looks like. Now, to my knowledge, no one has ever talked about this because there's this blank code names and numerology that they're using within these, and A-16 appears to be an actual real bird within the black world. I don't think it's been talked about before. So this is a high-speed, stealthy attack aircraft. Oh, and you've got my legacy of UFO cases as well.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. I'm working to get a website up for UFO Road Trip, and I want to put a bunch of this material available, including I want to scan a bunch of the material that we got from our first trip down to the Gray Barker collection, and
Sure.
And get that information online. While I'm working on putting together, some content and stuff for that channel as well. What's next on the agenda? What do you think we obviously want to go hit up some conferences and go out there and meet people and get connected this summer.
I think we should somehow meet with Linda Zimmerman. She's a very good researcher. She's the sole surviving researcher kind of with me regarding the Hudson Valley boomerang case. We kind of work together, and she's a very big proponent of that particular case being very historical. So am I. I think it's a fantastic case. It's almost completely forgotten about. It's been over 30 years now, and it's the biggest case within ufology, but it's just completely forgotten about because it's so far removed from what's going on now that no one even knows about it anymore. But yet it represents the most historic group of sightings within all of ufology. We're talking about over a 10-year period, 25,000 eyewitnesses reported these boomerang-shaped craft, multicolored flashing lights on the bottom, and then what looked like tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of these vehicles. And it happens over and over and over again. So maybe in another installment of this series, we can go into that.
Right. And I found a guy added me recently on Twitter, and he had all these pictures of these projects that he was involved with these giant triangular-shaped dirigible craft. They're like giant balloons, and they look a lot like the Phoenix Light craft or stuff like that. And the pictures of them in all these hangars and stuff. I thought that was really interesting. I'm gonna send that stuff to you, and we'll talk about that later. Anything else you want to say before we? I want to wrap this stream up. And
I think we've covered it all, Jeremy, and thank you very much. Certainly interested in doing another installment, but yeah, glad we covered what we did here.
Right. It gives people a good introduction to you, because there's people in my audience that don't know who you are. They're not familiar with your work, and they get to kind of get a sense of what kind of stuff what kind of research you do, and where you're coming from with all this. And, I think it's good. We're gonna put together a good team where we're gonna have a good collection of different minds with a lot of different perspectives on things to try to come up with some really good analysis on a lot of these subjects. Again, I wish that Dan was here to join us, and anyone else that would like to join us in the future, please contact me, the alien scientist, at gmail.com. Drop us an email, and we'll see about getting you on for an interview, or getting you maybe on the list of places we're going to stop on our future road trip tours, as we go around and collect information on all these investigations. Lots of
Sounds
stuff.
Good.
I can't wait.
Sounds good.
I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be quite the adventure, and it needs to be done. So,
thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for coming on, and everyone who's watching out there. Thank you all for your support, and thank you for sharing this and sending it out. And I'm going to get some links together and start putting that in the description right now for you guys, so you can have some information. Especially, I'm sure everyone wants to take a shot at that $5,000 prize that you mentioned earlier, and take a shot at that crossword puzzle. So I'll get a link to that in the description as soon as I can, and people can take a